this episode, I'll be taking a look at the 2024 reissue of the SH Figuarts Super Saiyan Trunks, the Boy from the Future. This figure originally came out in 2023, and I have the 2023 release here on the left. And while I really liked the 2023 release, there were definitely some problems with the way the figure was built, wobbly hips, and the left bicep joint not having a strong enough connection. The most obvious way to tell the difference between these two is the Tamashii Nation's quality sticker. The circle is much smaller on the 2024 reissue, and it no longer has this triangle pattern. That is the best, surest way to tell. The 2023 original release, big circle, quality sticker, triangle pattern. The 2024 reissue with much sturdier joints and better left bicep connection is smaller, quality sticker, no triangle pattern. Other than that, they're pretty indistinguishable. Let's go ahead and take both of these out of the box. Original release still on the left, reissue on the right. Visually, there really isn't much separating these two, and I think that's a very, very good thing because the looks were doing a lot of the heavy lifting for my enjoyment of the original release, and I'm sure many others felt the same way, kind of like they were putting up with a slightly frustrating figure to have such a great looking, very posable future Trunks figure. One thing you might have noticed or may already know about if you've got the original or seen videos about it is the abdomen piece was put on backwards. It's not too difficult to flip it around the right way so that it looks like this, but just so that we have a point of differentiation between these two, I've spun it back around the way it was out of the box. One, so that we can tell the difference between the two, and two, to highlight the fact that the new version is put on the right way, right out of the box. The faces look a little bit different, but I think it's just the shape of this bang. On the original, it curls in a little bit more and covers more of his right eye, whereas on the new one, it is pushed out a little bit towards the side, and so you can see almost his entire right eye. And that, honestly, is probably just down to production variance. The biggest differences that you're going to notice between these two are in the feel. Not only did they correct kind of the major flaws with the original, they have improved it across the board. And I'm going to go over every change that I've noticed so far having the reissue figure. The first and probably the biggest problem with the original release was this left arm's bicep connection. It's built in a very common way for Figuarts where the elbow joint actually has a long peg that plugs up into the shoulder piece and the bicep just kind of fits around that like a sleeve. And on this original figure, if you tried to move the arm by grabbing the arm, you pretty much are guaranteed to pop the arm off like that. In some ways, it's not the worst thing because it's kind of trained me to only move the shoulder joint by grabbing the shoulder, which is always a safer thing to do to avoid putting any strain on that inner peg there. But, I mean, you can see it's like wobbling around. It's really not supposed to do that. It's just a straight cylindrical peg. And yeah, if you try to like rotate his arm towards his back, it happens more often when I try to rotate the arm down because the elbow doesn't bend that way. More than likely, the arm is not going to rotate and this is going to pop out. I don't know what they've changed, whether they have just lengthened that peg, but the new version has no problem whatsoever. It is honestly just not even close to an issue on this. That was the fix I was most interested in because it does get a little bit annoying when you're trying to put him in cool two-handed sword pose and his arm keeps popping off. So far, they put his abdomen on the right way. They fixed the connection at the left bicep. What about the hips? The original has some unexpected audio features. See that wiggle? That is not supposed to be happening. I think that's the best way to show it. And again, reissue here. Oh yeah, that is what I like to see. No wiggle whatsoever. Rock solid hips. Nice. Those are the 2 or 3 biggest issues that I was really hoping they would correct, and I'm very glad to see that they have. I say 2 or 3 because I don't know whether you really want to count the abdomen being put on backwards. It's definitely weird and doesn't need to be that way, but it's easy enough to spin this one around. Like I said, I've spun it back the wrong way just so that we know which one's which. Now, I want to talk about the improvements that I wasn't necessarily looking for, but I am pleasantly surprised by. When I first took the reissue out of the box, the first thing I went to try was this left arm. In doing so, I not only discovered that, yes, they fixed that bicep swivel, but they really refined the shoulder joint overall. And what came to mind is the very, very pleasant memory of when I first opened Super Saiyan Goku. And I am very pleased to report that the joints on this Trunks feel as buttery smooth, silent, solid, stable as I raved about in this Goku figure. And that is just something I was not expecting at all. Like, just the fluidity of these shoulder joints, I didn't think that was something they'd be able to really match with any sort of frequency. I love that. I was so happy when I felt that. And not only the shoulders, even, the hips. Here's the original. Okay. And not only that, that as well. And here's the new one. That's wonderful. Can't believe not only did they fix the bicep, the hips, but they have refined every joint on the figure. And here, another one. It's torso. And that's not just because it's on backwards. That's what it does all the time. New Trunks torso. But I don't know, something has seriously changed in the manufacturing of this second run. It is as visually stunning as the original release and mechanically perfect. The unfortunate thing about this new Trunks being so good, it's definitely possible for anybody who's bought the original release to feel like they've been burned a little bit, and I think that's totally understandable. I think it puts a lot of people in kind of a hard position where maybe they bought this Trunks thinking that would be it. They didn't really say anything about the reissue fixing various problems. It was kind of a wait and see maneuver, and I'm glad they fixed so many problems. I'm glad that Bandai Tamashii Nations are a brand that recognizes when there are problems and is willing to correct them. I like to follow the Star Wars Black Series line and was really a fan of the Ahsoka series and excited about figures of characters from that series. But when they came out with so many inaccuracies that just weren't explained, weren't addressed, weren't recognized are probably never going to be fixed. Looking at you, Balin Mercenary Edition, making me appreciate this that much more. They reissue it and massively improve it, and now you might buy it twice. I don't want to dance around that fact, though, that it is an awkward position to put consumers in. Let me know how you feel about it. It's very strange. Bringing so much refinement to all of the joints top to bottom has soothed the pain of buying the same figure twice a little bit for me. Obviously, sending everyone who bought the first one of these would be lovely, but also would never happen in a million years. Alright, now with the 2023 release comparisons out of the way, let's take a look at this 2024 reissue. We've got SH Figuarts Super Saiyan Trunks, the boy from the future, Bandai, Tamashii Nations, Dragon Ball Z, Toei Animation holographic sticker, designed by Tamashii Nations in Japan, Bandai Spirits made in Vietnam, Tamashii Nations holographic quality sticker. Remember, the reissue has the smaller circle with no triangles. Product intended for ages 15 and up. Warning, this contains choking hazard small parts, not for children under 3 years. Like this pose on the front of the box, I think they were maybe going for a slicing up Mecha Frieza. I've got some kind of little ink splotch here on this image. Not real sure what that's about. Let's see, spinning around the left, the name of the figure. It's nice they give them kind of these subtitles so you can find the figure you're searching for, because they've made several different Super Saiyan Trunks figures at this point. Then let's see, flip around the bottom. Neutral face, looking straight on. Name of the figure. This accent color is, I think, probably taken from his eyes. If you'll remember, I believe Frieza freaks out because he has the same eyes as Super Saiyan Goku. So, nice little nod to the character there, although it could also be taken from his sword strap, I'm realizing. It's a little more green than the strap on his sword to me. So, yeah, let me know if you think it's his eyes. I think it's his eyes. Let's see, we've got on the right-hand side, putting the sword in the sheath, something you couldn't do with the original Trunks, since the sword was not completely storable. Very strange middle image here. Honestly, feels like it should be this on the side, and yeah, normally they have a face, some sort of face portrait here, so really weird that we get his ear and shoulder instead. Down at the bottom, there's usually some kind of shoe thing going on, and we can see his shoes. And finally, around the back, we see all the promotional images. On the top, just picture of base form head. Cool. All right, let's crack open the box. Got the trusty hobby knife. I've already cut the tape. Stick the blade of my knife just under the flap here, push it towards the back, pop it open, nice clean opening on the flap. You get some instructions here that tell you about the different hands. Give you a quick glance at the inside of the box. Got that nice aqua blue accent color throughout. Like I said, I think it's his eyes. It's too green to be the color on the sheath. One by one, we'll go over his accessories. He comes with a neutral, straight-ahead Super Saiyan face with the Super Saiyan hair, 2 pairs of bangs for the Super Saiyan hair, a more relaxed pair, and then this is kind of like a flowing backwards, powered up hairpiece, and I'll show you how that looks. Kind of grumpy looking to his right, side-eye face, shouting looking straight ahead, gritting teeth looking straight ahead, and then a base form head with a single serious looking forward face. I really wish he had at least one smirking face. I know Trunks comes from a very dark timeline, but he does have some lighter moments with Gohan and Krillin especially, so it would have been good just to have that character personality trait unlocked. Then of course we've got a bunch of hands, 2 fists, 2 flat hands, 2 open hands, 2 slightly less open hands, and then 2 sets of sword gripping hands. One holds the sword more at an angle, and then one holds it more straight vertically. Cool. And finally, his sword itself comes in the sheath and works kind of as you would expect the function of the sword in the sheath to work. It's not a separate sword with a hilt that plugs into the sheath. It's nice you can pose it with the sword partway unsheathed, but at the same time I do worry about the paint scratching off of the blade. There's not a ton of paint, which I personally think is a good thing, especially for animated characters. I think that animated characters that are typically cel shaded do not lend themselves to like really heavy shading art style. So I actually really like that they have gone for this cleaner style on more modern Figuarts. The paint hits that are present, let's see, there's just a bit of shading in his hair. Between Trunks and Legendary Super Saiyan Goku, I think they're really starting to dial in the Super Saiyan hair color. And I really like this pale yellow. It's a very nice muted color. It's not banana saturated. It's not candy corn orange shading. And there is a little bit of like pearlescence on Goku at least. You can just see it kind of there as it catches the light. And Trunks, on the other hand, does not have that, so that's one difference. The chest skin tone is painted, and painted skin tone versus plastic skin tone, and the two are going to be very, very difficult to match up. And they're not perfect here, but that is definitely within a reasonable margin of error for me. How did they do on his collar? Pretty good. It's a little bit fuzzy around the perimeter there, but it's not really noticeable at a regular distance. His belt has a couple of paint applications here. I think it's molded in this yellow, and then the blue, silver, and brownish red are all painted in, and there is a little bit of blue overpaint onto the silver buckle. You can see the Capsule Corp logo is probably some kind of decal. Pretty cleanly applied. There's a little bit of a seam going down the middle of it. He has gold buttons on his jacket. Are these cufflinks? I don't know. Maybe. There's some nice fabric kind of stretched into the button there. That's a nice effect. Around the back, if you didn't like this jacket the first time around, it's exactly the same. Split down the middle to really allow for the shoulders to be brought forward. I don't mind it. I prefer that to being restricted on movement. Then his pants are just this kind of straight, dark gray. And I know some people didn't like how shiny the finish is, but personally that's kind of how it always was in my mind's eye. Like, Trunks is a hip kid in the 90s, so I always imagined that his pants were made of like nylon or some like raincoat material. I actually kind of prefer it this way. Then I've seen some people give it matte coat to dull it down, and I don't think it looks as good. That is my preference on the pants. Then his boots, he's got these sweet moon shoes with Velcro straps, brown paint across the toes, white on the soles, manufacturing stamp on the bottom of his left foot, which I'm never really a fan of that. I wish they could keep those off the figures, please. But I know they gotta do what they gotta do to keep track of stuff. More brown paint on the heels. And that is really clean. I'm impressed with that. Cool. And if you're new here, when I go over articulation, what I like to do is kind of create a reference line with parts on the figure so that you can get like a real idea of what the range is on the joints. So what I do is I put the arms front to back like this, talk about the forward and backward, and then I'll spin them around to the side, put them in a T pose, and we'll do side to side tilting and talk about that. All right. His head is one of the more limited aspects. I really want to see them improve here, especially looking up for characters that fly around all the time. He really doesn't look up very much, so that could definitely be improved. That's maybe 30 degrees up. Looking down is a bit better. That's closer to 45, which is about what you want to see on joints like these. His elbow is a nice and smooth double joint, and it bends about 135, 90, and then another 45. And then, of course, the arm can swivel around. We'll talk about the butterfly joints last. Bicep swivels work very well. Let's talk about his torso. There are at least 2 ball joints, ball and socket joints, and then I think there's a hinge somewhere around, like maybe the waist to the abdomen. And with that, he can lean back a decent amount. The belt actually is going to tilt a little just because it's a floating piece that moves to get out of the way if you are tilting him back. Combined with the neck, it's still not that much, so leaning back is a little limited on this figure. That's maybe 35 degrees, 35, 40, and then another 30 at the head and neck. He really can't look up much more than that, which is not very good for, again, characters that fly around all the time. And then going forward is better. He can actually almost look inside his foot line, which is pretty rare, but you can see the ab crunch going forward more than 45 degrees. And then combined with the neck, he can look pretty much dead straight down at the floor. So that's actually really good. His wrists are your typical swivel, hinge, ball, peg, combo joint that imports like to use. We've got the up and down orientation here, which is great for your sword slashes, and then you can spin the swivel around and put it in the horizontal orientation, which is better for like your blast poses. And that works pretty much the same it always does. His sleeve does get in the way a little bit more than I would like. Not sure there's a better way to do that other than just maybe, I've seen on some of the Star Wars figures, they've made like a slip joint for the wrist, where when you pull it out, it doesn't actually pull the hand off. It pulls just a little extension of the swivel so that you can get a little bit more range around the sleeves, but not in this case. And his hips are great. They kick up past 90 degrees, and everybody's favorite 3.0 butt prevents it from kicking straight back, but if you just rotate him at the waist the tiniest amount, you can get a very effective front-back split going quite nicely. I think that looks good and is pretty much anatomically spot on. You can't actually kick straight back through your butt, so yeah, I actually prefer this much more over the 2.0 floating cap thing. Nice double hinge knee. Again, the 3.0s have done a wonderful job with kind of filling out the thickness of the leg. The 2.0s have very thin legs if you look at them from the side. The thigh is a full thigh, and that looks great. And he kicks back about 135 degrees, 90 plus another 45, pretty much the same as the double hinge at the elbow, and it looks pretty good. There's a little bit of gapping, but I don't mind it. I like the range. The thigh swivel's interesting on this figure. I think the reason they changed it from the Ultimate Gohan Superhero, where it was kind of a straighter cut across, is this looks much better from the side. And you don't really need thigh swivel past about 90 degrees out. A little bit in is also all right for if he's like off balance or something. His ankles are a little bit limited. They go down just 30 degrees or so. They don't go up very much at all because of the way the boot is shaped, but you do get the toe hinge, which goes past 45, almost to 90 degrees, so that works well. It looks good. Toe hinge is the one place you'll still find pins on these Figuarts Dragon Ball figures for whatever reason, but at least with 3.0 they started replacing the metal pins with plastic that matches the color of the shoe, so they're much less obvious. They're pretty small, so they've never bothered me too much. I definitely would rather have a toe hinge and a pin than no toe hinge at all. He can raise his arms into a T-pose, no problem at all. The neck gets a decent amount of tilt, actually. Maybe a little under 45 degrees tilting side to side. The torso can tilt also a little under 45, combined with the neck, maybe like 75, 80 degrees. Tilting to the side, he swivels at both the waist and the diaphragm cut, which looks very nice, I think. It's well incorporated into the sculpt. So swiveling at both, he can kind of very easily tilt any direction, swivel all around, and that works beautifully. The hips kicking out to the side work extremely well. The 3.0 hips have been pretty much perfection from the jump. They look a little odd from the bottom. Maybe they could do something about filling in the rest of this, but I don't know. It doesn't bother me. And I definitely like the functionality, and the sturdiness on this particular figure is quite good. Finally, his ankle. It's got a similar swivel hinge, swivel combo joint. So we talked about the hinge. You also, from the swivels, can swivel the foot around and give him some ankle tilt, which is not the best, but it is about 45 degrees, and splits with the feet flat. Get him about there. So 45 on either side makes a nice 90-degree bend like there. And finally, my favorite part of this figure is these shoulder joints. These are some of the best shoulder joints on any action figure in existence. They are up there with the best of Mafex, the best Figuarts, which is, for me, probably the legendary Super Saiyan Goku. They are a similar design to a Mafex shoulder joint. The ball peg goes into a socket into the torso, and the socket is connected to another ball peg that goes down into the torso. And so what that means is that socket can actually swivel around and tilt in and out. And so when you are using this like a butterfly joint, what you want to do first is kind of tilt it out and then swivel it forward, and that will get you the most range on the forward butterfly movement. So let's do it from this side. This is all the way pushed in. If you pull it out a little bit before you swivel it forward, you'll get a little bit more range. It looks funny right now, but just swivel forward. You can see the back of the jacket doing its job, flexing. I do get a little concerned about these places where you can see it starting to stress just a little bit. It's not the biggest point of concern for me. Cut the way it is, like these are already cuts there. I did not tear this, but you can see at the corner of those cuts it is stressing a little and might tear further beyond the point where they cut. Ball joint out and then swivel forward. You can very easily cross his wrists out in front, which is phenomenal. That is what you want for sword-wielding characters that need to do two-hand sword gripping poses, deep sword slash poses. And then other nice things with this design, it's not only forward butterfly motion, but you get very similar action going backward, easily touching his hands behind his back. And what that's useful for is anytime you want to pose the character about to attack, you can pull their shoulders back like they are winding up a punch. You also can pull them back as if they are kind of balancing as they're gliding through the air. And I think overall that is a really nice feature of these more modern shoulder designs. And then his head will get in the way for this part, but what this also would allow, in theory, if you could get the head in the right pose around this somehow, is to kind of form an A shape above his head, so he can do raising his sword with two hands over his head for a slash. Overall, I think this is just a fantastic articulation setup. I'm very happy with pretty much all of it. The only points that I think could be better are the neck looking up, and maybe the wrists could have a little bit more clearance around the sleeves. The nice thing about fewer hinges and more ball joints is you can really pull off more natural body language, where you can really take your posing body language to the next level when you have the ability to take the waist and tilt it, and take the shoulder line and tilt it, and then take the neck and level it out on top of that. In classical sculpture, they would call that contrapposto. None of the lines are parallel. You can get really natural looking human movement. And here's Trunks with the base form head in a sort of relaxed sitting, holding his sword and sheath pose. I think that looks pretty cool. So to take the sword out of his hand, you actually can take this little pommel off so that the hilt can slip through. So the sheath, or scabbard, whatever it's called, has these blue straps with silver buttons. The strap is solid, soft blue, and then you just need to kind of thread this strap under his left arm, pop that in. I don't know, it might be about the same. I think that is one issue I didn't really expect to change this time around. Just given the way this part was designed, I don't think there is a way they could have fixed it, other than I really think they should have just used like a magnet or something. So as it is, the sword strap is still fiddly, unfortunately. Yeah, so what I'm doing here, I'm putting the hand onto the sword, so that way I'm not fussing with the sword while it's in the sheath, risking the paint. And now I just need to connect the hand to the arm. Easy enough. Pop the pommel back on the end of the sword. That works out pretty well. And then let's just fine-tune the pose a little bit. Cool. Okay. Let's try the next one. Alright, now let's try getting him into a two-handed sword pose. I find it is usually easiest to do this with figures by first putting the hands onto the sword, rather than trying to put the sword into the hands already attached to the arms. You just put the hands that you want onto the sword in kind of the orientation that you expect them to be in. Yeah, and now what we're going to do is kind of pre-pose the arms. What I want here is just maybe like a kind of weight on his back foot, sword pointing forward, head looking that way. So that should pop right on. And then let's bring those arms down a little bit. And this is why Trunks is my favorite character, because he just kind of falls into poses like this and looks sick. And the Falconer score completely slaps, and Trunks' theme is no exception. Now, one point of articulation that I mentioned could have been a little bit better is the wrist. Really would like for sword wielding character to be able to get a pretty steep angle between the sword and the arm, to the point where they can almost hold the sword out straight parallel to the arm. And the jacket just really doesn't leave enough room for that. So if you wanted to get that sort of slicing up Android 14 or 15, whichever one it is, you're going to have to resort to some photographic trickery here like I did. And that is a little bit of a disappointment. And then when it's time to turn things up a notch, we've got the Super Saiyan head with the side-eye face here. I think this pose was from some old Dragon Ball illustration or poster, promotional image with Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks in their Super Saiyan forms that I always liked to draw. And so, yeah, this one always stuck with me as well. I'll see if I can find that image and put it into the photo here. This is one that works out pretty well. No real articulation limits getting in the way. So that's awesome. Okay, and here I'm going for the slicing up Frieza pose. Basically get the hands swinging the sword in front of him as much as they can. And the biggest problems I have hitting this pose are actually the neck, not letting him look up. Maybe if I give him kind of a cocked to the side, that will help achieve the effect I'm going for. Yeah, that seems to actually help a little bit. And then again, the wrist, not letting the sword, really the sword should be, if I disconnect the right wrist, it should probably be more like that. that's probably more what I would like this figure to be able to do. I don't know what I can do about these wrists. I wish they had given him, like, if you've got the Figuarts Star Wars Mandalorian Luke Skywalker figure, and he actually has that feature I was talking about where you can actually pull the wrist joint out of the sleeve a little bit to get that, like, fully extended deep wrist bend. But as it stands, you pretty much have to kind of fake it if you want that really straight out extended sword swing. But that's not too bad. You can see on the box, they are really not pushing the shoulder past the point where the jacket ends. Instead, what I've done is I've popped it pretty much as far forward as I can. There is a gap there, but I just slid the strap for the sheath over the gap. Of course, the other big difference in how I've posed him is the wrists, and you can see the angle of their sword. And now for the finishing move on Mecha Frieza, we gotta get this slice and dice key blast under the arm pose going. I think this is one of the most challenging poses for a figure to achieve, just with the arms having to come across the front of the body so much, and I love how well this figure is able to pull this off. I think it looks really, really good. Yeah, I mean, granted, they're working with a prototype when they're taking these pictures, I think, so they probably can't push it too much. This is how I usually have this figure on display if I'm displaying him. So, overall, mechanically, they did a really nice job refining the joints to the point where they are on par, as smooth as legendary Super Saiyan Goku's. He's going to be a complicated one in my kind of historical ranking of Figuarts releases. There's always going to be an asterisk by that of it took 2 attempts and I had to buy the figure twice. This has been the Art of Action Figures, bringing you a look at the SH Figuarts Trunks Boy from the Future, the 2024 reissue. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.